The crack of a gunshot echoed across the Arkansas plains as Faith Mitchell's wagon wheel splintered, sending her heart racing with fear and the realization that this day might be her last. The year was 1876, and Faith, a spirited 23-year-old with auburn hair that caught the sunset's glow, was 3 days into her journey to Fort Smith when disaster struck in the form of both a broken axle and the distant thunder of approaching horses that could only mean one thing. The Blackwell gang was closing in. Faith leapt from the driver's seat, her skirts billowing as her boots hit the dusty ground. The contents of her father's general store supplies meant to restock their shelves in Fort Smith rattled precariously in the tilted wagon. Her hands trembled as she examined the damaged wheel, knowing she had minutes at best before the outlaws arrived. "Damn it all," she muttered, scanning the horizon for any sign of help. The vast expanse of prairie grass offered no comfort, just the sight of 5 riders appearing like specters against the golden sky, their silhouettes growing larger with every passing second. Faith's fingers closed around the small derringer hidden in her pocket, her father's insistence before she'd made this trip alone. 1 gun with 2 bullets against 5 outlaws. The mathematics of survival did not favor her. A movement to her left caught her attention. From behind a cluster of rocks emerged a tall figure, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. His approach was cautious yet purposeful, and Faith raised her derringer with a shaking hand. "I mean you no harm, miss," the man called out, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Name's Isaac Ingram. Looks like you could use some help and fast." Faith kept her gun trained on him. "Those men following me won't be as friendly as you're pretending to be." Isaac glanced over his shoulder, his expression hardening as he assessed the approaching riders. The Blackwell gang. "I recognize their formation." His eyes met hers, blue and steady. "I can fix that wheel, but we need to move quick. Your choice is to trust me or face them alone." Without waiting for her response, he moved toward the wagon, dropping to one knee to examine the broken axle and wheel. Faith noticed the worn leather of his boots, the practiced way his hands moved over the damage, and the rifle strapped securely to his back. "They're after me because I witnessed them rob a bank in Little Rock," Faith explained, lowering her gun slightly. "I was making a delivery and saw their faces clear as day." Isaac nodded without looking up, already pulling tools from a saddlebag she hadn't noticed he carried. That would explain their determination. They don't leave witnesses. His hands worked with practiced efficiency despite the approaching danger. "I need you to hand me that spare wheel from the back of your wagon." Faith hurried to do as he asked, lifting the heavy wooden wheel with effort. As she returned, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, watching as he positioned the wheel. Isaac's lips curved into a brief smile, though his eyes remained focused on his work. "Let's just say I've got no love for the Blackwell gang and even less for men who chase down women on lonely roads." He paused his work just long enough to pull his rifle free and hand it to her. "Know how to use one of these?" Faith took the Winchester, its weight familiar in her hands. "My father taught me. Said a woman traveling alone in these parts needs to know how to protect herself." "Smart man, your father." Isaac returned to his work, his strong hands making quick adjustments to the axle. "If they get too close before I'm done, aim for the horses. Not to kill, just to startle them. Buys us time." Faith positioned herself behind the wagon, using it as cover while she sighted down the barrel. The riders were close enough now that she could make out features: the leader's scarred face, the red bandana of his second in command. "Isaac," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "they're nearly here." He grunted in acknowledgement, sweat beading on his forehead as he secured the wheel. "Almost got it. Just need to. A sharp metallic click punctuated his words. There. He rose in one fluid motion, dusting his hands on his faded denim pants before drawing his Colt revolver from its holster. Get in the wagon. I'll take the reins. Faith hesitated only a moment before climbing aboard, keeping the rifle ready. Isaac leapt onto the driver's seat beside her, taking the reins with one hand while his other remained on his revolver. Hold on tight, he warned, and with a sharp whistle and snap of the reins, the horses lurched forward. The wagon jolted into motion just as the first bullets whizzed past them. Isaac kept his eyes forward, guiding the horses with expert precision while Faith turned, aiming the rifle at their pursuers. There's a ravine about a half-mile ahead, Isaac called over the thundering hooves and gunfire. Narrow passage. They'll have to go single file. It's our best chance. Faith nodded, bracing herself as the wagon bumped over the uneven terrain. She fired a warning shot, not aiming to kill but to slow their pursuers. The lead rider's horse reared, throwing off their formation momentarily. Isaac steered the wagon with increasing speed, his face a mask of concentration. Faith found herself studying him even amidst the chaos, the strong line of his jaw, the determined set of his mouth, the way his eyes constantly assessed their surroundings while keeping them moving forward. "Why were you out here alone?" she asked, reloading the rifle with cartridges he'd passed her. "I wasn't exactly planning on company," he replied, a ghost of a smile crossing his features. "Been tracking the Blackwell gang for 3 days. They've got something that belongs to me." Another bullet splintered the side of the wagon and Faith ducked instinctively. "What could be worth risking your life over?" Isaac's expression darkened. "A pocket watch. Gold. Has my family crest on it." He navigated a sharp turn, bringing them closer to the ravine he'd mentioned. "Only thing I have left of my father. They took it off me when they left me for dead 6 months ago." The ravine appeared ahead, a narrow passage between rising rock walls. Isaac urged the horses faster, the wagon wheels kicking up dust as they approached the natural bottleneck. "When we get in there, keep your head down," he instructed. "The echo will make their shots more dangerous, but they'll have a harder time maneuvering." Faith nodded, taking a deep breath as they entered the shadowed passage. The temperature dropped immediately, the sun's rays unable to penetrate the high walls surrounding them. The wagon wheels clattered loudly against the stone floor of the ravine, the sound bouncing off the walls around them. Behind them, the outlaws were forced to slow, entering the ravine in single file as Isaac had predicted. Faith fired again, her shot ricocheting off the rock walls and causing the lead rider to duck. "Nice shot," Isaac commented, navigating a particularly narrow section. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "My mother died when I was young. My father raised me to be practical, not decorative," Faith replied, pride evident in her voice. "Said the frontier was no place for weakness, regardless of whether you wore trousers or skirts." Isaac nodded appreciatively. "Your father sounds like a wise man. Hope I get to tell him that someday." The ravine began to widen, revealing an open meadow ahead. Faith's heart sank as she realized they would soon lose their advantage. "Isaac, what's the plan once we're in the open?" He pointed ahead with his chin. "See that line of trees? There's a creek that runs through there. We cross it, then follow it north. Water will hide our tracks and the trees will give us cover." As they emerged from the ravine, the outlaws' shouts echoed behind them. Isaac urged the horses to their limits, the wagon bouncing dangerously over the uneven ground. Faith held tight to the side railing, her knuckles white with strain. They reached the tree line just as more gunfire erupted behind them. Isaac guided the wagon into the shallow creek, the water splashing as the horses pulled them through. The coolness was a momentary relief from the heat and dust of their escape. "We keep following this creek for about a mile," Isaac explained, his voice low as they moved deeper into the wooded area. "There's an old trapper's cabin I know of. We can take shelter there until nightfall." Faith nodded, still clutching the rifle. "And then what?" Isaac's blue eyes met hers, determination evident in his gaze. "Then we head to Fort Smith. I assume that's where you were bound." "Yes. My father's store is there. Sullivan's General Goods on Garrison Avenue." Recognition flickered across Isaac's face. "Jonathan Sullivan is your father?" Faith nodded, surprised. "You know him?" "Bought my last pair of boots from his store," Isaac replied with a small smile. "Good man, fair prices." The wagon continued along the creek bed, the sound of water and birdsong replacing the earlier gunfire. The outlaws' voices had faded, suggesting they'd lost their trail for now, but Faith knew it was temporary at best. "They won't give up easily," she murmured, glancing back through the trees. "No," Isaac agreed, his expression grim. "Not when you can identify them, and not when they think I'm dead already." He guided the horses around a fallen log. "Makes folks mighty uncomfortable when the dead come back to life." Faith studied him with renewed interest. "How did you survive?" Isaac's jaw tightened. "They ambushed me outside of Little Rock. I was transporting payroll for the railroad, shot me twice and left me in a ditch." His hand unconsciously moved to his side. "Local doctor patched me up. By the time I could ride again, the Blackwell gang had disappeared with my father's watch and $5,000 in railroad money." "You're a railroad man?" Faith asked. Isaac shook his head. "Former marshal. I quit the badge after losing too many friends to outlaws who never faced justice. Railroad security paid better anyway." The trees began to thin, revealing a small clearing ahead with a weathered cabin nestled among the pines. Isaac slowed the horses, approaching cautiously. "Wait here," he instructed, handing Faith the reins before jumping down from the wagon. He drew his revolver, approaching the cabin with measured steps, checking the perimeter before peering through the single window. Faith watched him, noting the way he moved, confident but careful, like a man accustomed to danger. When he motioned that it was safe, she guided the wagon closer to the cabin. "It's been empty a while," Isaac explained, helping her down from the driver's seat. "Trapper who owned it died last winter. No one's claimed it since." The interior of the cabin was sparse but functional, a small stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame covered with an ancient-looking quilt. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through the grimy window. "We should rest the horses," Isaac suggested, already moving to unhitch the team. "They've pushed hard. There's a small spring behind the cabin where they can drink." Faith nodded, setting the rifle aside to help with the horses. Working together, they quickly unhitched the team and led them to water. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the clearing. "Thank you," Faith said quietly as they returned to the cabin. "For stopping, for helping. You could have just kept riding." Isaac's expression softened slightly. "Some things a man can't ride away from, Miss Sullivan." "Faith," she corrected him. "If we're running from outlaws together, I think we can dispense with formalities, Mr. Ingram." A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his serious features. "Isaac, then." Inside the cabin, Faith assessed their supplies while Isaac checked the perimeter again. She had enough food packed for her journey, though sharing would mean rationing. More concerning was their ammunition. Isaac's revolver was half empty, and the rifle had only 7 rounds left. "We should reach Fort Smith by tomorrow evening if we leave at first light," Isaac said as he returned, securing the cabin door. "The Blackwell gang will likely search for us through the night, but they'll be slowed by darkness and unfamiliar terrain. Faith nodded, arranging some of her supplies on the table. I have some dried beef and biscuits. Not much of a meal, but it'll keep us going. They ate in companionable silence, the weight of the day's events settling around them. As twilight deepened outside the cabin windows, Faith found herself studying Isaac's profile in the fading light: the straight nose, the slight crease between his brows that suggested he frowned more often than he smiled, the way his eyes constantly moved toward windows and doors, ever vigilant. "How long have you been tracking them?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. 3 weeks, he replied, his voice low. "Picked up their trail outside of Memphis. Been gaining ground slowly." He met her gaze across the table. "Until today. Now they know I'm alive and they know I'm behind them." Faith considered this. "Does that help us or hurt us?" "Both," Isaac admitted with a wry smile. "They'll be more cautious, which slows them down, but they'll also be more desperate. Desperate men make dangerous choices." As darkness fell completely, the sounds of the forest intensified: the chorus of crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustle of creatures moving through underbrush. Isaac insisted Faith take the bed while he positioned himself near the door, his revolver within easy reach. "You should rest," he told her. "Tomorrow will be a hard ride." Faith settled onto the narrow bed, pulling the old quilt around her shoulders despite the warmth of the evening. She watched as Isaac leaned his head back against the wall, his hat tipped low over his eyes but his posture still alert. "Isaac," she said softly, "thank you again." He lifted his hat slightly, those blue eyes finding hers in the dim light. "Get some sleep, Faith. I'll keep watch." Morning came with a hint of fog clinging to the trees, providing additional cover as they prepared to leave. Faith helped Isaac hitch the horses while keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. The woods remained peaceful, giving no indication of pursuit, but neither of them was fooled by the temporary calm. "We'll follow the creek for another mile or so, then cut east toward the main road," Isaac explained as they climbed onto the wagon. "It's riskier to be in the open, but we'll make better time." Faith nodded, settling beside him on the driver's seat. She'd repaired her hair as best she could without a proper brush, and washed her face in the spring. It wasn't much, but it helped restore a sense of normalcy after yesterday's chaos. They set off at a steady pace, the wagon wheels leaving clear tracks in the damp earth near the creek. Faith knew this was a calculated risk: speed over stealth, but trusted Isaac's judgment. His experience as a marshal showed in everything from his constant vigilance to his strategic thinking. "Tell me about Fort Smith," Isaac said after they'd been traveling for an hour, clearly trying to keep her mind occupied. "Your father's store doing well?" Faith smiled, grateful for the distraction. "Better than well. We expanded last year to include a second floor with ready-made clothing. My father has always had an eye for opportunity. When the railroad came through, he was one of the first to secure contracts for supplying the workers." "Smart business," Isaac commented. "Fort Smith's growing fast. Good place to put down roots." "Is that what you're looking to do?" Faith asked. "Put down roots somewhere." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Haven't thought that far ahead. Been focused on catching the Blackwell gang after that." He shrugged. "A man gets tired of drifting eventually." They emerged from the woods onto a wider trail that showed signs of regular use. Isaac tensed slightly, his hand moving closer to his revolver, but the path remained deserted. "We should reach the main road by midday," he said, urging the horses to a faster pace. "From there, it's a straight shot to Fort Smith." Faith nodded, fighting the urge to look over her shoulder every few minutes. "Do you think we've lost them?" "No," Isaac replied honestly, "but we've gained ground. That might be enough." The sun climbed higher as they traveled, burning off the morning fog and bringing the full heat of the day. Faith retrieved a canteen from her supplies, offering Isaac a drink before taking one herself. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, a brief moment of contact that sent an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. As Isaac had predicted, they reached the main road shortly after midday. The wide dirt track showed recent-use wagon wheel ruts, hoof prints, and the occasional boot print pressed into the dusty surface. Isaac studied these signs carefully before guiding their wagon onto the road. "More travelers means more witnesses," he explained. The Blackwell gang prefers isolation for their work. They passed a family heading the opposite direction, a farmer with his wife and 3 children perched atop a wagon loaded with supplies. Isaac tipped his hat politely while Faith exchanged smiles with the woman. The normalcy of the encounter was reassuring after the previous day's danger. As afternoon wore on, they began to see more signs of civilization: fenced fields, occasional farmhouses in the distance, and finally, other travelers headed in the same direction toward Fort Smith. Isaac remained vigilant, his posture relaxing only slightly with each mile that brought them closer to safety. "My father will want to thank you properly," Faith said as the spires of Fort Smith's church became visible on the horizon. "He's not a man who forgets a debt." Isaac shook his head. "No debt to speak of. Just did what any decent man would do." Faith raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? I seem to recall being alone on that road for quite some time before you appeared. Plenty of decent men must have ridden past without stopping." A slight smile tugged at the corner of Isaac's mouth. "Perhaps I had additional motivation." "The Blackwell gang," Faith nodded. "Your father's watch." "That," Isaac agreed. "And the fact that it's not every day a man comes across a woman facing down outlaws with nothing but determination and a daring-er." Faith felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Necessity makes us brave, I suppose." "Some people," Isaac corrected her. "Necessity makes some people brave. Makes others turn tail and run. You're not the running type, Faith Sullivan." The outskirts of Fort Smith welcomed them with increased activity: wagons delivering goods, cowboys leading horses to and from stables, and townspeople going about their business. Faith directed Isaac toward Garrison Avenue, relief flooding through her at the familiar sights. Sullivan's General Store stood proud on the corner, its freshly painted sign visible from a distance. Faith felt a rush of emotion at the sight of her father sweeping the boardwalk in front of the store, unaware that his daughter was returning after facing death just a day earlier. "That's him," she said, pointing. "My father." Isaac nodded, guiding the wagon to a stop in front of the store. Jonathan Sullivan looked up, his weathered face breaking into a wide smile as he recognized his daughter. "Faith, you're early," he called, setting aside his broom to approach the wagon. His smile faltered slightly as he noticed Isaac and the damaged side of the wagon where bullets had splintered the wood. "What happened?" Faith climbed down, embracing her father tightly before turning to introduce Isaac. "Father, this is Isaac Ingram. He saved my life yesterday when the Blackwell gang attacked my wagon." Jonathan's face paled. "The Blackwell gang? Dear God!" He turned to Isaac, extending his hand. "Sir, I cannot thank you enough for protecting my daughter." Isaac accepted the handshake. "Your daughter did plenty of protecting herself, Mr. Sullivan. She's quite handy with a rifle." Pride flashed across Jonathan's face before concern returned. "Come inside, both of you. This calls for a proper meal and explanation." He glanced at the damaged wagon. "And repairs." Inside the store, Faith was struck by how normal everything looked: the neatly stocked shelves, the polished counter, the familiar scent of leather and coffee beans. It seemed impossible that just yesterday she had been fighting for her life on a dusty road miles from here. Jonathan locked the front door, flipping the sign to closed before leading them through the store to the living quarters in the back. The small apartment was comfortably furnished, with a kitchen area, dining table, and sitting room all flowing together in one open space. "Sit, sit," Jonathan insisted, already moving to the stove where a pot of stew simmered. "You must be hungry after such a journey." As they settled at the table, Faith recounted their adventure from the moment the wagon wheel broke to their narrow escape through the ravine. Jonathan listened with increasing alarm, his hands gripping his coffee mug tightly. "They saw your face clearly," he asked when she finished. "These outlaws know what you look like," Faith nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. I was making a delivery to the bank in Little Rock when they rode in. I saw each of their faces plain as day before I ducked behind the counter." Jonathan turned to Isaac. "And you say they believe you're dead?" "They did until yesterday," Isaac replied. "Now they know I'm alive and helping your daughter. That makes Fort Smith their likely next stop." He glanced out the window where twilight was beginning to settle over the town. "They won't come tonight, too many people, too much law, but they'll come." Jonathan rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Sheriff Davis is a good man, but he's got just 2 deputies against the Blackwell gang." "I didn't come here looking for a fight," Isaac said quietly. "But I won't walk away from one either, not when Miss Sullivan's safety is concerned." Faith met his gaze across the table, seeing determination and something else, a protectiveness that went beyond simple duty. Her father clearly noticed it too, his eyes moving thoughtfully between them. "You'll stay here tonight," Jonathan decided. "I've got a spare room upstairs. Tomorrow we'll speak with the sheriff, make arrangements." After the meal, Jonathan insisted on showing Isaac to the small room above the store while Faith prepared for bed in her own quarters. The familiar surroundings brought comfort, but sleep eluded her. Every creak of the building, every distant sound from the street below set her nerves on edge. After an hour of restless turning, she donned her robe and made her way to the kitchen for a cup of tea. She was surprised to find Isaac already there, seated at the table with a cup of coffee, his revolver within reach. He looked up as she entered, offering a slight smile. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly. Faith shook her head, moving to the stove to heat water for her tea. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them coming after us." Isaac nodded in understanding. "First time I was shot at, I didn't sleep right for weeks. Gets easier with time, though I'm not sure that's a good thing." Faith settled across from him, cradling her teacup between her hands. "What will you do, if we manage to stop the Blackwell gang?" "When," Isaac corrected her. "When we stop them." He considered her question, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "Thought about heading to California. Heard there's good land there, opportunity for a man willing to work hard." "Farming?" Faith asked, trying to picture this hard-edged former marshal tending crops. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Maybe, or horses. Always had a way with them." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "What about you? Planning to stay in Fort Smith, help with the store?" Faith nodded. "It's what my mother would have wanted. She and my father built this place from nothing." She paused, considering. "But sometimes I wonder what else might be out there. What other life I might build." They fell silent, the quiet of the sleeping store wrapping around them like a blanket. Outside, a horse and rider passed slowly down the street, the clip-clop of hooves fading into the distance. "You should try to rest," Isaac said finally, his voice gentle. "Tomorrow might bring trouble." Faith stood, gathering her empty cup. "You should rest too. You can't keep watch forever, Isaac." His blue eyes met hers, unwavering. "I can tonight." Morning brought bustling activity to Garrison Avenue as Faith helped her father open the store. Isaac had disappeared at dawn, mentioning only that he needed to check something before returning. Jonathan watched his daughter's frequent glances toward the door with knowing eyes but said nothing. When Isaac finally returned mid-morning, his expression was grim. He gestured for Faith and her father to join him in the back room away from customers' ears. "They're here," he said without preamble. "Two of them at the saloon down the street, asking questions about new arrivals in town." Jonathan's face tightened with concern. "How many in total?" "5," Isaac replied. "The other 3 are probably scouting the town's perimeter looking for weaknesses." He looked directly at Faith. "They know you're here. Someone recognized your description." Faith felt a chill despite the warm morning. "What do we do?" "I've spoken with Sheriff Davis," Isaac said. "He's willing to help, but he's realistic about his chances against the Blackwell gang. Suggested we might consider leaving town until he can summon assistance from Fort Gibson." Jonathan shook his head firmly. "I won't be driven from my home by outlaws." "Neither will I," Faith agreed, straightening her shoulders. Isaac studied them both, respect evident in his gaze. "Then we prepare. The sheriff is quietly gathering a few trustworthy men from town. They'll be watching the roads and the saloon where the outlaws are staying." "And us?" Faith asked. "We spring the trap," Isaac said simply. "The Blackwell gang wants you, Faith, because you can identify them. They want me because I'm tracking them and they thought they'd killed me. If they think they can catch both of us at once, they'll come." "You want to use my daughter as bait?" Jonathan asked incredulously. "No," Isaac replied firmly. "I want the Blackwell gang to think Faith is vulnerable while actually having her well protected. There's a difference." Faith placed a calming hand on her father's arm. "What exactly did you have in mind, Isaac?" As Isaac outlined his plan, Faith found herself admiring not just his strategic thinking but his determination to end the threat while minimizing risk to innocent bystanders. By the time the store closed for the evening, everything was in place. Faith stood at the upstairs window, watching the last customers leave as twilight settled over Fort Smith. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair arranged in a practical braid. Below, her father secured the front door before making a show of extinguishing the lamps visible from the street, all part of Isaac's plan to make it appear they were retiring for the night. Isaac himself was positioned in the shadows of the storeroom, watching the back entrance. Sheriff Davis and 4 armed townsmen were stationed strategically around the building, while 2 more kept watch on the saloon where the Blackwell gang members had been seen. "It's nearly time," Jonathan said quietly, joining Faith at the window. "Are you certain about this?" Faith nodded, though her heart hammered in her chest. "I can't run forever, Father, and neither can Isaac." Jonathan studied his daughter's face carefully. "You've grown quite fond of him in a short time." Faith felt warmth creep into her cheeks. "He risked his life for me. That creates a certain bond." "Is that all it is?" her father asked gently before Faith could respond. A soft whistle from below signaled movement. Isaac appeared in the doorway, his expression alert. "They're coming," he said quietly. 2 from the front, 3 from the back." "Just as we expected." Faith took a deep breath, moving to her position behind the counter where a loaded shotgun waited. Her father took up his own post near the stairs, armed with his old army revolver. Isaac melted back into the shadows, his Colt ready in his hand. The minutes stretched endlessly as they waited in silence. Faith could hear her own breathing, too loud in the quiet store. Then came the soft scrape of boot leather against the back door, someone testing it carefully, trying to determine if it was locked. A sudden crash shattered the silence as the back door splintered inward. Simultaneously, glass broke at the front of the store as someone forced entry through a window. Faith crouched lower, her fingers tight around the shotgun stock, waiting for Isaac's signal. "Sullivan." A rough voice called out. "We know you're here." The girl, too. Faith recognized the voice from the bank robbery. Luther Blackwell himself, leader of the gang. She fought to control her breathing as footsteps moved cautiously through the store. "Come out peacefully, and nobody gets hurt," Luther continued, though the malice in his tone belied his words. "We just need to have a little talk with the girl about what she thinks she saw in Little Rock." From her position, Faith could see shadows moving among the store shelves, 3 men spreading out, searching methodically. She knew 2 more would be coming from the front. Isaac's signal came in the form of a single shot, perfectly aimed to take down the outlaw nearest the back entrance. Before the man had even hit the floor, Faith rose and fired the shotgun over the counter, the blast catching a second outlaw in the shoulder and sending him sprawling. "It's a trap!" someone shouted as gunfire erupted throughout the store. Faith ducked back down as bullets splintered the wood around her. She could hear her father returning fire from his position, and Isaac's controlled shots from the shadows. Outside, Sheriff Davis and his men would be moving in, cutting off escape routes. Through the chaos, Faith spotted Luther Blackwell himself moving toward the stairs, clearly intending to use the upper floor as a vantage point. Without hesitating, she broke cover, raising the shotgun again. "Stop right there, Blackwell," she commanded. The outlaw leader spun toward her, his revolver already rising. Faith fired, but her shot went wide as she was forced to dive for cover. Blackwell's bullet struck the counter where she'd been standing a second earlier. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, girl," Blackwell growled, advancing toward her position. A shadow moved behind him, Isaac, emerging from his hiding place. "She's not the only one," he said coldly. Blackwell whirled, recognition and shock crossing his face. "Ingram, you're supposed to be dead." "Disappointed?" Isaac asked, his revolver steady in his hand. Blackwell fired wildly, forcing Isaac to take cover behind a shelf of dry goods. Faith used the distraction to reload her shotgun, her hands shaking but determined. "Give it up, Blackwell." Sheriff Davis's voice boomed from the front entrance. "Your men outside are already in custody." Trapped and desperate, Blackwell made his decision. He lunged toward Faith, clearly intending to use her as a shield. Faith scrambled backward, but her foot caught on a fallen box, sending her sprawling. Isaac moved without hesitation, tackling Blackwell before he could reach Faith. The 2 men crashed into a display of canned goods, sending tins clattering across the floor as they grappled for control of Blackwell's gun. Faith raised her shotgun, trying to find a clear shot, but the men were too entangled. Jonathan appeared at her side, his own weapon trained on the struggle. With a violent twist, Isaac wrenched Blackwell's gun away, sending it skidding across the floor. The outlaw leader responded by drawing a knife from his boot, slashing wildly. Isaac jerked backward, narrowly avoiding the blade, then drove his fist into Blackwell's jaw with enough force to momentarily stun him. In that instant of advantage, Isaac pinned Blackwell to the floor, disarming him completely as Sheriff Davis and his deputies swarmed into the store. "You all right?" Isaac asked Faith, his breathing heavy as the deputies secured Blackwell. Faith nodded, lowering her shotgun as relief flooded through her. "Thanks to you." Again. The aftermath brought a flurry of activity. Wounded outlaws carried to the doctor's office under guard, statements taken by Sheriff Davis, curious townspeople gathering outside despite the late hour. Through it all, Faith remained close to Isaac, noting how he winced slightly when he moved his left arm. "You're hurt," she said when they finally had a moment alone in the back room of the store. Isaac shook his head dismissively. "Just a scratch." Faith frowned, setting aside the coffee pot she'd been preparing. "Let me see." Reluctantly, Isaac removed his jacket, revealing a tear in his shirt sleeve where Blackwell's knife had found its mark. Blood had soaked the fabric around the wound. A scratch. Faith echoed incredulously, already gathering clean cloths and a basin of water. "Sit down before you fall down, Mr. Ingram." Isaac complied with a tired smile, watching as Faith carefully cleaned the wound. It was indeed relatively shallow, though it had bled freely. "Sheriff Davis found something you might want," Faith mentioned as she bandaged his arm. "When they searched Blackwell." Isaac looked up sharply. "My father's watch," Faith smiled, nodding toward the table where the gold timepiece now rested. "He wanted to return it personally, but I told him you needed tending first." Isaac reached for the watch with his good hand, his fingers tracing the engraved family crest on its cover. When he opened it, Faith caught a glimpse of an inscription inside before he closed it again, his expression a complex mixture of satisfaction and old grief. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I did nothing but tell the sheriff where to find you," Faith replied, securing the bandage. "Not just for that," Isaac clarified, his blue eyes meeting hers. "For everything. Your courage. Your trust." The moment stretched between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. It was Jonathan's entrance that finally broke the spell, carrying a tray with 3 glasses and a bottle of whiskey. "I think we've earned this," he declared, setting down the tray and pouring generous measures. "To justice served and lives preserved." They raised their glasses in a toast, the amber liquid burning pleasantly as Faith sipped hers. Outside, the town was quieting again as the excitement waned and people returned to their homes. "What happens now?" Faith asked, directing her question to both men but looking at Isaac. "The Blackwell gang will face trial here in Fort Smith," Jonathan answered. "Judge Parker doesn't look kindly on outlaws. They'll hang before the month is out." Isaac nodded in agreement. "Justice at last for their many victims." He turned the gold watch in his hand thoughtfully. "I should be moving on soon. My business with the Blackwell gang is concluded." Faith felt an unexpected pang at his words. "Where will you go?" "I'm not certain," Isaac admitted. "Perhaps California, as I mentioned." Jonathan cleared his throat meaningfully. "There's no need for hasty decisions. Fort Smith could use a man of your capabilities, Mr. Ingram." He glanced at his daughter before continuing. "In fact, I've been considering expanding the store again. Could use a partner with a good head for business and security matters." Isaac's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's a generous offer, Mr. Sullivan." "Jonathan, please," Faith's father insisted. "And it's not charity. It's a sound business proposition. Think it over." With that, Jonathan excused himself, leaving Faith and Isaac alone once more. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with potential rather than tension. "Would you consider staying?" Faith asked finally, her voice soft. "In Fort Smith, I mean." Isaac studied her face carefully. "Would you want me to?" "Yes," Faith answered without hesitation. "I would." The following weeks brought changes to Fort Smith and to Sullivan's general store. The trial of the Blackwell gang dominated local conversation, with Faith's testimony proving crucial to their conviction. Isaac remained in town, initially as a guest of the Sullivans while he recovered from his wound, then as an increasingly integral part of their business. Summer faded into autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular colors to the trees surrounding Fort Smith. The store thrived under the combined management of Jonathan and Isaac, with Faith overseeing the new clothing department on the second floor. Their reputation for fair dealings and quality goods spread throughout the territory, bringing increased business with each passing week. On a particularly beautiful October afternoon, Isaac found Faith arranging a display of women's hats near the front window. The sunlight caught in her auburn hair, creating a halo effect that made him pause in the doorway, momentarily transfixed. "Your father's looking for you," he said when she noticed him watching. "Something about a special order that's arrived." Faith nodded, adjusting one final hat before stepping away from the display. "Probably Mrs. Henderson's fabric. She's been waiting nearly a month for it to arrive from St. Louis." Isaac fell into step beside her as they moved toward the storeroom. "I was thinking," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "perhaps you might join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant this evening, to celebrate our successful first quarter as partners." Faith glanced at him curiously. Isaac Ingram was many things: brave, intelligent, skilled, but nervous was not a quality she associated with him. Yet there was definitely an unusual tension in his posture as he awaited her response. "I'd like that very much," she replied with a smile. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Fort Smith, with white tablecloths, polished silverware, and a small ensemble playing gentle music in the corner. Faith wore her best dress for the occasion, deep green velvet that complemented her auburn hair and fair complexion. Isaac had clearly made an effort as well, wearing a new suit and crisp white shirt that transformed him from the rugged frontiersman she'd first met into a distinguished businessman. "You look beautiful," he told her as they were seated at a corner table with a view of the street outside. Faith felt warmth rise in her cheeks at the simple compliment. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." Conversation flowed easily between them as they enjoyed their meal. They discussed the store, local politics, and their plans for the upcoming winter inventory. It was comfortable and familiar, yet Faith sensed an underlying current of anticipation throughout the evening, as though Isaac was building towards something important. It wasn't until they were enjoying coffee and dessert that he finally reached into his pocket, placing his father's gold watch on the table between them. "I never told you what's inscribed inside," he said quietly, opening the case to reveal elegant script engraved on the inner cover. "Time reveals true hearts. My father had it engraved when he married my mother." Faith looked up from the watch to find Isaac's blue eyes fixed intently on her face. "These past months in Fort Smith have been the happiest of my life," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his expression. "Not because I finally brought the Blackwell gang to justice, or because the store is thriving. Because of you, Faith." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I came to Arkansas hunting outlaws, but I found something infinitely more precious. I found you brave, intelligent, beautiful you." Faith's heart hammered in her chest as Isaac stood, still holding her hand, and moved to kneel beside her chair. Around them, other diners noticed what was happening, conversations halting as attention turned toward their table. "Faith Mitchell," Isaac said, his voice clear and certain now, "I love you. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Time seemed to suspend as Faith looked into the face of this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. The former marshal who had fixed her wagon while keeping watch for outlaws. The partner who had helped transform her father's store into the most successful business in Fort Smith. The man whose quiet strength and integrity had captured her heart completely. "Yes," she answered, joy bubbling through her like champagne. "Yes, Isaac Ingram, I will marry you." The restaurant erupted in applause as Isaac rose, pulling Faith gently to her feet and into his embrace. His kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Fort Smith, bringing a stream of well-wishers to the store the following day. Jonathan Sullivan was perhaps the least surprised of anyone, greeting the news with a knowing smile and heartfelt congratulations. "Your mother would have approved," he told Faith privately. She always said you'd know your own mind when the time came. As winter descended on the Arkansas frontier, preparations for the spring wedding occupied much of Faith's free time. Isaac threw himself into expanding their business ventures, purchasing a small property on the outskirts of town, where he planned to raise horses alongside his work at the store. Christmas brought a heavy snowfall that transformed Fort Smith into a wonderland of white. The store closed early on Christmas Eve, allowing the Sullivans and Isaac to celebrate privately in the apartment above. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth as they exchanged gifts and shared memories of holidays past. "I have something special for you," Isaac told Faith as the evening grew late. He handed her a small package wrapped in silver paper. Inside, Faith found a delicate gold locket. When she opened it, she discovered a miniature portrait of her mother on one side, a painting Faith had kept in her room for years. "Your father helped me with your mother's likeness," Isaac explained. "The other side is for us when we have our wedding portrait taken." Tears of happiness blurred Faith's vision as she clasped the locket around her neck. "It's perfect. Thank you." Spring arrived with renewed energy and purpose. The wedding was scheduled for the first Saturday in April, when the orchards would be in bloom and the weather mild. The entire town seemed involved in the preparations, from the seamstress creating Faith's gown to the baker planning an elaborate cake. On the morning of the wedding, Faith stood at her bedroom window, watching as the town came to life below. The same street where she and Isaac had faced down the Blackwell gang was now decorated with ribbons and flowers in celebration of their union. "Ready, sweetheart?" her father asked, entering the room in his best suit, his eyes misty as he beheld his daughter in her wedding gown. Faith nodded, smoothing the ivory satin of her skirt. "More than ready." The church was filled to capacity as Jonathan escorted Faith down the aisle. At the altar stood Isaac, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his expression transforming from solemn to radiant as he caught sight of his bride. Beside him, Sheriff Davis served as best man, their friendship having solidified in the months following the Blackwell gang's capture. As they exchanged vows, Faith felt a sense of absolute rightness. This man, who had once been a stranger repairing her wagon while keeping watch for danger, was now the central figure in her life story. Their beginning may have been forged in danger and necessity, but their future would be built on something far stronger, a deep and abiding love that neither had expected but both now treasured above all else. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Isaac's kiss was gentle yet possessive, a public declaration of private devotion that brought cheers from the assembled guests. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Faith felt his hand tighten around hers, a promise of protection and partnership that would endure through whatever challenges lay ahead. The reception at the hotel lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than the entire town could consume. Faith and Isaac moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who had witnessed their story from its dramatic beginning to this joyful culmination. As twilight settled over Fort Smith, they slipped away to the small house Isaac had prepared for them, a comfortable dwelling halfway between the store and the horse property he was developing. Unlike the rough cabin where they had first taken shelter together, this home represented permanence and possibility, with rooms ready to be filled with life and laughter. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ingram," Isaac said softly as he carried Faith across the threshold. Faith smiled, linking her arms around his neck. "Home," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." Years passed, bringing growth to both Fort Smith and the Ingram family. Their first child, a son named Jonathan after Faith's father, arrived exactly 1 year after their wedding. 2 years later came twins Rebecca and Robert, whose energy and curiosity kept the entire household in constant motion. Sullivan's General Store expanded to include a second location in the growing railroad district, while Isaac's horse breeding business gained reputation throughout the territory for quality stock. Jonathan Sullivan eventually retired, though he remained a frequent visitor to both the store and his grandchildren, whose antics never failed to bring a smile to his weathered face. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, Isaac surprised Faith with a journey retracing the path from Little Rock to Fort Smith, but this time in comfort and safety, staying at proper hotels rather than abandoned cabins. "Remember this place?" he asked as they passed a familiar ravine, now bordered by a small farm. Faith nodded, leaning against him in the carriage. "How could I forget? You saved my life that day." Isaac shook his head, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "We saved each other, and have been doing so ever since, in different ways." When they reached the spot where Faith's wagon had broken down, now marked by a small homestead, they stopped for a picnic lunch. While their children played under the watchful eye of their nurse, Isaac presented Faith with another gift, a journal bound in soft leather. "I've been keeping this since the day we met," he explained as she opened it. "The story of us from my perspective." Faith turned the pages slowly, finding detailed accounts of their escape from the Blackwell gang, the ambush at the store, Isaac's growing feelings for her, and his nervousness before proposing. The most recent entry had been written that morning, a reflection on 5 years of marriage and the joy their family brought him. "This is precious," Faith whispered, deeply moved by the window into her husband's thoughts and feelings. "Thank you for sharing it with me." "I thought our children might want to read it someday," Isaac replied, "to understand how their parents found each other against impossible odds." That evening, as they settled into their hotel room in Fort Smith, Faith found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. From a broken wagon and approaching Outlaws to a thriving family and business, their story had unfolded in ways neither could have imagined during those first desperate moments together. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, joining her at the window where she stood watching the sunset over Fort Smith. Faith turned to him with a smile, taking in the familiar features that had only grown more dear to her over the years, the blue eyes that still watched over her with unwavering devotion, the strong hands that had fixed her wagon while keeping guard, and later had cradled their newborn children with infinite tenderness. "I was thinking about time," she answered, her fingers finding the gold watch he still carried. "How it truly does reveal true hearts, just as your father's watch says." Isaac drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held the same passion as their first, now deepened by years of shared life and love. Outside their window, Fort Smith continued its evening routines, a town that had witnessed their story from its dramatic beginning to this quiet moment of contentment. "I love you, Faith Ingram," Isaac murmured against her hair, "more with each passing day." Faith nestled closer, her heart full of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought this man into her life. A broken wagon, approaching Outlaws, a quick repair while keeping watch, the beginning of a love story that would endure through all the seasons of their lives together. "And I love you," she replied, "my watchful protector, my husband, my heart."